Hey guys, Gio here, back with another retroactive review, and today I'm doing Control. I love this game and there is so much to unpack, so I'm really not even sure where to begin, but I'm going to give it a good go because I really love this game and I think it's something special. I originally played the game on the PS4, but it recently came onto PS Plus, the deluxe edition, so I've been playing that on the PS5. I'll be focusing mainly on this newer version just because there's more to discuss with that version, like new graphical modes and things like that. I'm going to break the video up into sections as always. We'll start with gameplay, then graphics, story content, and some DLC content too, even though I've not played through the entirety of the DLC. We'll talk more about that later. I may include some spoilers throughout the video, but there'll be a spoiler warning before any of that, so don't worry. And if I'm honest, there's not much to spoil because the story is so abstract that you won't understand what I'm spoiling anyway. But with that, let's get straight into the video.
Slidescape 36. What Darling brought back changed everything.
So even gameplay wise, there is just so much to unpack, and that's just the base game without any of the DLC additions. The gameplay is mainly combat with some puzzle solving thrown in here and there to break up the pace, and a lot of exploration. The puzzles I found to be genuinely challenging at times, but I'm also a person who doesn't have a lot of patience. And so how difficult these are will definitely vary from person to person. Most of them are manageable, and if you're really struggling, you can always come to YouTube and find the answers, which is what I did. But let's just take a deeper look at the combat.
This was a mistake.
Wow, this game's combat is so incredible. I think one of the best ways to describe it is kinetic, especially on the PS5 as the DualSense controller intensely vibrates with every hit, and the adaptive triggers offer different levels of resistance depending on what version of the service weapon you're using. Speaking of the service weapon, this is what you'll be using throughout the entire game. Yes, it is one weapon and it's a gun in this case, but it has multiple firing modes that you can unlock and craft as you play the game. These range from a standard pistol, which is what I stuck with if I'm completely honest, a shotgun, which I also use throughout the game, a rifle, and some more powerful modes like a grenade launcher. I have to be honest, the best modes are definitely the standard firing mode and the shotgun mode, in my opinion. They lend themselves to combat scenarios far more often than the other forms, but they're still interesting and unique, and you'll find your own playstyle as you experiment with different firing modes. You can have two firing modes active, and you swap between them and at the press of a button, which is really nice. I think maybe having the option to unlock an additional slot and have three firing modes would have lent itself for more experimental gameplay, but the system is fun regardless. Alongside this, you will frequently pick up mods for your guns, as well as mods for your character, Jesse. Upgrading the guns and Jesse allows you to add more mod slots to make yourself more powerful. These enhancements range from being really useful, like a damage boost for your favorite gun, to being absolutely useless, like a 5% increase in stamina regeneration after a headshot. Something crazy like that you're literally never going to use. These feel kind of arbitrary and unnecessary, but regardless, they are there and I suggest making use of them because some of them, like I say, are really good. So the service weapon is pretty great, but the most fun aspect of the combat is the powers you gain as you play and how you can use those alongside your gun. These powers range from telekinesis, allowing you to pick up objects and launch them at enemies, to levitating around the environment. Using these abilities costs energy, but this regenerates pretty quickly and can be upgraded in the skill tree so that you always have plenty of energy. Your powers are also upgraded in this skill tree, and the upgrades feel substantial every time and very powerful, keeping the gameplay really fresh. You can upgrade your launch abilities and make it super powerful, allowing you to throw massive objects and deal damage to enemies in this way. Or maybe you prefer to play a bit more defensively, and so you upgrade the shield ability, so you can get up close to your enemy and melee them to death. How you play is honestly entirely up to you, and this is what makes the combat so fun. It's so dynamic. You can approach each scenario differently. Me personally, I love boosting myself up into the air above my enemies, thinning them out with my gun. So like I say, I use the standard pistol. I've got some mods on there that make it insanely powerful. So usually if they're not dead, they're on like next to no health, and then I launch a chunk of the environment at the crowd to finish them off. The combat honestly never gets old, and this is what is going to keep you coming back to this game. On the subject of combat, who or what are you fighting? You're fighting an enemy called the Hiss, who I'll talk more about later in the story section of this video. But for now, all you need to know is that the enemy variety is pretty decent. There are your average grunts who are easy to take out, flying guys with telepathy, massive armored thugs with rocket launchers, and a couple more. Enemies can also have a shield spawn around them meaning you have to break that down before killing them, and sometimes a red orb-like thing will spawn and continuously heal enemies, which will force you to change up your strategy and gun for that straight away, because otherwise no one's done. Overall, enemy variety is fine. There are enough different types to keep it fresh, even if they aren't too hard to kill off. Definitely a case of strength in numbers here, because they don't do tons of damage and are easily torn to shreds by your powers and your weapon. Also, just something to notice, some of the side boss encounters here are great and really different. I remember encountering a hidden side boss inside a demonic fridge. Yes, this game is very strange. And that encounter was completely different to any of the others. This was so cool, and it's a shame it was a side boss and more of the main boss battles weren't like this. Because most of the boss battles are pretty basic and the enemies are just basically damage sponges. And this was a little bit disappointing for me, but there's enough great side bosses that the main bosses are excusable. Another big facet of gameplay is exploration. You're going to be exploring the oldest house, the location this game takes place in, a lot. And you're going to get lost over and over again. Trust me, even on my second playthrough, I found myself getting lost constantly. There's this one certain mission where you have to go to this particular place in the environment, and I remember being stuck on it the first time I played the game, and I got stuck again on the second time playing the game. That is how tricksy the environment is. But saying that, they are really well designed. All of the environments are. Just a little confusing at times, and the god-awful map does not help much at all. You're going to be circling back through old areas and accessing new ones, going to new mind-bending locations, and heading back to old locations to find some hidden secrets very often. And this is great. It really makes you feel like a lived-in environment. People go here to work, and something bad has happened, and that is really reflected in the visuals, which we're going to talk about in a minute. I've heard complaints from others that they find the interior of the oldest house a bit drab. There's a lot of grey, but I completely disagree. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of grey, but each different sector of the oldest house has its own style and things to see, and due to the constant shifting of the environment or the beautifully detailed destruction you can cause to practically anything, there's always something visually pleasing to see. You know, the environments are very varied too. You can go down to the maintenance sector and it's all dark, dingy corridors. Come up to the research sector, there's a lot of red going on. I believe that's what they're called anyway. I'm spitballing here, but I'm pretty sure the research sector is like this beautiful environment with lots of red. There's another place where it kind of reminded me of Harry Potter. It's got a big staircase going up. The staircase isn't moving or anything, but that's just the vibe it gave me. And there's like trees growing in there. It looks really cool. So I definitely think the game has plenty of visual variety. That brings us perfectly to the part of the video where I tell you how stunning these graphics are. I mean, you're seeing this gameplay, right? It's honestly amazing. The game has two graphics modes, a performance mode and a fidelity mode. Both run at 4K, but the fidelity mode has ray tracing and is capped at 30 FPS, and the performance mode has no ray tracing but runs at 60. Just a side note, this is becoming a trend in a lot of games, and I hear that Ratchet & Clank, which is one of the PS5 flagships, is going to also ship with this, and I do hope that eventually we get to a point where we have games that run at 4K 60 with ray tracing on consoles. That's what I want to see, but I digress. Let's go back to Control. So I played the game mainly in the 60 FPS mode. I really valued the additional frames because they make the game feel much more fluid, and the amount of visual effects that are on screen is already amazing without the ray tracing. Saying that, the ray tracing is really impressive and is actually pretty noticeable, but it doesn't really add much to the game if I'm completely honest. I think most people are going to value additional frames over the graphical effects, especially as the graphics are really stunning no matter what. The ray tracing, like I already said, is very obvious. There are reflections everywhere in this game and it looks great, but moment to moment gameplay feels much better in the 60 FPS mode. So maybe when you're just walking around and not in a combat scenario, you might just want to play in the fidelity mode, and then when you hop into a combat scenario, you quickly switch. I don't know how you guys play games. For me, that isn't satisfying. I just play in the 60 FPS mode. Textures look great. There's a nice amount of colour splashed throughout the game, like I already said, especially in certain areas like the Ashtray Maze. Damn, this location is so cool. And enemies always have a distinct red glow around them, which really gives them that otherworldly feel. There's also a lot of darkness in the game. Many areas have really deep, dark, thick shadows that are hard to see through, which really adds to the feeling that you're alone on this journey through the oldest house, trying to sort the problems out. Regardless of the graphical mode you choose, you're always going to be blown away with great visual effects all around here. Also, just the sheer destructibility of everything. I touched on it earlier, but the way everything is modeled is amazing. Tearing apart chunks of the environment to throw them at your enemies always looks fantastic. You can throw grenades that they've launched at you back at them. Pick up, at some point, you find a forklift. You can throw forklifts at your enemies, it is crazy. And like I said, with the grenades, you can launch those back and the explosions will decimate an area, leaving massive damage. This is really impressive, and I hope more games begin to make destructible environments more of a thing. Granted, in Control, it has no particular gameplay meaning. It's just to look cool, but I love destructible environments and I would love to see more of it.
What is happening? I don't like this. No, this isn't me. I'm not me. I can't.
The story of Control is both the best and the worst part of it. You play as Jesse, you've been through a traumatic experience as a child and your brother was snatched away from you. So you travel to the Federal Bureau of Control to find your long lost brother, and you find it in a lockdown. You pick up the service weapon from the body of the dead director and become the director yourself. You're introduced to the antagonists, the Hiss, and then you continue on your merry way blasting through enemies as the plot unravels. So the story is really fun and I personally enjoyed it. But, and there is a but, its presentation is so abstract that it can at times be a little bit hard to follow. Your main character has some sort of being that lives within her, named Polaris, and so spends a lot of time basically talking to herself, which can be a bit jarring during cutscenes and make the dialogue feel a little unnatural at times. In all fairness though, I personally feel like the story is supposed to be presented in this odd, abstract way, and I love it for that. Sure, there's a lot of metaphors and essentially just pure nonsense, but it all feeds into this amazing world that Remedy have created, and I love it because of that. Everything in this place feels slightly off, and the sense of immersion this brings is honestly fantastic. There are loads of little collectible files, audio logs, and other little bits to collect, which in most games I'm really not a fan of, but here it's great. A lot of it isn't just exposition or spelling things out for you. The documents have been doctored in game, and you don't get the full picture of what's going on. Each thing you collect, you learn a little more, but also have another question in the back of your mind. I absolutely love this about Control, and these documents are just masterfully done, and I found myself constantly hunting for more. The side missions here are great too, and in some cases are better than the main story. I've mentioned already some of the best boss battles happen in the side quests, and overall they're just really fun. There's this really cool one, I won't spoil it too much, but let's just say it involves a mirror, and in this world of Control, the mirror is significant. I'll let you guys play the game and discover that, because I thought this was really cool and pretty challenging. There are still the typical randomly generated side quests here that will tell you to go to a specific area and kill a certain amount of enemies, maybe in a specific sort of way. That sort of side quest that is pretty meaningless, but will net you some rewards and can be cool to occasionally do. You don't have to do these though, and I often don't, just because they're sort of filler, they're a bit of fluff. I'm not bothered about them myself. On the topic of DLC, at the time of recording, I've only played one of the DLCs included in the Ultimate Edition, the one that links in with Alan Wake, but damn man, I really enjoyed it. It adds a new area into the game and a boss that you have to defeat. Being based off Alan Wake, you're in the dark and the enemy you're fighting can only hurt you in the dark. This makes you use your powers in some cool ways to quickly dart between patches of light as quickly as possible, whilst also frantically trying to give power to the whole room that you're in to hurt the creature. You also have to use your telekinesis ability in a different way here, picking up lights so that you can burn away different patches of darkness, which I actually thought was pretty cool. The standard Hiss enemies are still in this area, but are a bit more challenging, and they are pretty high level here and can deal and take a lot of damage. I actually died a couple times in this bit, which is interesting because Control is not a hard game. While I enjoyed the DLC and I thought it was cool that it confirmed the shared universe, the gameplay here is a bit repetitive. You're heading into different rooms, powering on the lights to damage this monster. You do this 2 or 3 times, and then at the end of the DLC, you go and fight it head on as the final mission. The battle is okay, but again, it's nowhere near as fun as some of the side bosses in this game, and instead just feels a bit like a bullet sponge. Despite those few shortcomings, it's still a good DLC, as it provides you with some more of an excuse to be in the oldest house and find even more cool documents that fill you in on the world's backstory. So here we are at the end, the conclusion. I think the game is honestly fantastic. It's a joy to play, with a very strange but fun story and a fantastic world to explore. It will keep you busy for a while with side quests, the DLC, and to be honest, you may just find yourself replaying the game because it's so fun, which is what I'm doing. This is a great package and definitely worth the money. I 100% recommend this game. You guys have probably noticed that I don't rate games with numbers. I feel like this isn't the best way to rate things, and so here I'm going to stick with that and just tell you that this is a really solid experience, and I definitely recommend it to you if you're a fan of anything slightly weird, stunning graphics, and incredibly satisfying kinetic combat systems. That is all for today, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and please leave a like if you've enjoyed, and maybe consider subscribing. I'll see you all next time.